What is going on, everybody? What is up? It is your boy Corn right here. But guess who I have right beside me? Because today is a special day, ladies and gentlemen. This is 3 weeks in the making. 3 weeks in the making. But beside me, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, you got the author, the illustrator, the editor, the creator, the end all and be all of Walter Paisley Cafe and Spadal. Ladies and gentlemen, I get to you none other, Mark Platt. Mark, say what's up to the people, man.
What is up? Skavuvi, konnichiwa. I'm learning Japanese. So yeah, thanks for having me, Corn.
and Mark rocking as usual. Got the bandana.
That's right.
Got the jacket. Hey, you already know.
This is my business clothes. This is my work clothes. that's what I do.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today, guess what we are reviewing? We are reviewing the 2002 cult classic When Kung Fu Meets the World of Vampires. Choi, hey, you're gonna have to help me out with this with his name, Mark.
Choi Hark.
Choi Hark. Choi Hark.
Right.
Choi Hark's Vampire Hunters. And as I learned earlier when I was researching this movie, it actually comes up as Era of the Vampire, right?
Yeah, that's another name for it. It was a lot of movies that come from overseas will get their names changed for marketing purposes. And of course the like in this case the Cantonese name might need to be changed for translation purposes, like the way the words literally are in the title may not make sense. It's for marketing purposes. So Choi Huck's name is added to Choi Huck's The Vampire Hunters for, because he was known for a few things that were catching on here. People, the Hong Kong cinema boom was the ball was rolling and in the 90s, so his name would have been known to a few people in the States. I don't know. I live in Toledo, and I was the guy that introduced everyone to Hong Kong films. I didn't find anyone around town that was into it. I'm sure there was maybe somebody, maybe some, like, I don't know, but like, possibly other than Asian people living here. Yeah, I don't know. But I'm sure in your bigger cities, there's more of a following. And of course, when you look at films like The Matrix having drawing heavy influence from John Woo films, then people were watching here. A lot of movies after the 90s, like a lot of the shit in action films coming out of Hollywood and the US owe quite a debt to Hong Kong action cinema.
Yeah. And before we get into the synopsis, which Mark is going to go over the synopsis here in a second, just want to give you guys this introduction as I seem to forget this new intro that we have here on Half-Ass. I forget this quite often. But, ladies and gentlemen, now, one day I will be able to get my shit together and actually put that introduction at the very beginning of the video. But for now,
we had a cold open.
Yeah. but ladies and gentlemen, I look, before we get into the movie, our opinions on the movie. Mark, do you want to let the audience know what exactly is Choi Huck's Vampire Hunters Era of the Vampire about?
All right. Well, I want to give a little background before we get into this to get our viewers, give the viewers a little bit of idea of what's going on here. There's a few cultural aspects that probably need to be known. When we watch Hollywood films, we probably don't even think about it. Films coming out of the U.S., but there are cultural things that we just take for granted. Writers do this a lot. They take these shortcuts. There's certain things that mean certain things, callbacks, like
Mhm.
just there's certain things. So the same thing goes for any film from other countries and other cultures. So, but primarily, this film is sort of a tribute to the hopping uh, zombie vampire legends. They're also known as Jiangxi, and the in 1980, a film came out called Encounters of the Spooky Kind. I'm sure that was the anglicized name. I don't know what the Chinese name was, but it was a horror comedy, and it made reference to these Jiangxi.
Mhm.
Prior to this, Asian films that had vampires in them had Western type vampires, the elegant, nicely dressed man, handsome, teenage girls want to fuck him type of stuff, and so, but spooky encounter, encounters of spooky. Well, it also called spooky encounters too. So yeah, a lot of names flying around. So yeah, that kind of started it. But Mr. Vampire in 1985 made it popular. It was a big hit, and a lot of these movies were comedies. A lot of horror films out of Hong Kong were comedy horrors, and Choi Huck pretty much did his uh, callback to that genre in 2003 because it had died down around 95 or so. So we hadn't seen any in a few years. But I think he did. I think he did. Like some people were like, oh, yeah, why did you take the comedy out of it? And critics were upset and everything. But I think there was an attempt at like kind of like how we're doing in Hollywood. Like, oh, yeah, we got to do Batman. We got to make him darker. We got to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We got to make them darker. So I think it was sort of like following that. Yeah,
Yeah.
but mind you, the director of this film is not Choi Huck. He directed films, but he also produced films. So, attaching his name to it. I mean, honestly, I don't know exactly what producers do. I know they're involved with bringing money to the film and things like this. Uh,
For producers, it's different for every movie, right? So some producers, all they do is throw money. They just throw the
mm,
money at the movie. They pretty much just finance the movie. Other producers kind of take that role of the director and then kind of dwindles the director's role. It all depends on the person, the producer, and it depends on the movie, right? And it also depends on how
right.
big are the production studios. Will they let the producer kind of do the stuff for them? Will they let the director, create and stuff like that? So it's different. Producers are the producer role is a very, very like wide range role because it could be like a big role as a producer or a very small role.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because I've never had like a very clear definition given to me, but you putting it that way, well, that makes sense. There's not necessarily a very cut and dry definition of what a movie producer does, and I imagine an auteur like Choi Huck might have had some hand in the creative aspects of it, but the director was Wilson Chin Sing Wai. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, before we get into our views on it, I just have to say I think he did an amazing job as far as cinematography and timing went. Yeah, so just some beautiful shots in this film. So, but yeah, Choi Huck was the screenwriter, so he had a huge creative input on that. So, I forgot to mention he was a screenwriter. So, yeah, as a producer and screenwriter, yeah, he had a stank all over it, right? But back to the Jiangxi, they come from legend, right? Okay, this film takes place during the Qing Dynasty, and that's the last imperial dynasty of China, right? It's before China, got was taken over by the People's Republic of China and got more, Marxist and socialist and westernized, more industrialized and things like that. So the Qing Dynasty is kind of a favorite of Hong Kong cinema. You know, a lot of the kung fu movies that you see were during the Qing Dynasty. You know, the Qing Dynasty was about, what was it? It ended in like, oh, I have it right here. Yeah, the Qing Dynasty ended in 1912. It started 1644 and ended
Oh
in
shit!
1912. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost
So that
300
was,
years.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. They were quite a while. So yeah, and the reason why I mentioned the Qing Dynasty especially is not only did this play take place during the Qing Dynasty, but the Jiangxi vampires in the movies uh, were commonly wearing the robes and the caps of Jiangxi, officials and things like this. You know, that's kind of a interesting, like, I don't know, kind of a bull inside of a dome type of hat, and these long like robes, and so they yeah, so the vampires were said to come from like southern China, where these legends started to come because a lot of people from all parts of Asia were traveling to southern China looking for work. And when they would die and get, buried or something there, a lot of people couldn't afford to get the bodies transported. So legend has it that people would be able to hire a Taoist priest. I don't know how familiar you are with Taoism. It's a very interesting philosophy slash religion that came out of China. Oh gosh, I don't even remember exactly, but look for the Tao Te Ching by or the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu or Xuanzi, the book Xuanzi. Taoist, yeah, I really love Taoist philosophy. It's very interesting to me. So yeah, this Taoist priest would travel to where the bodies were and perform a spell that would animate the bodies. But these bodies were uh, decomposed or had rigor mortis. So Jiangxi, it translates to stiff corpse. So classically, they would stick their arms out like this and just be able to hop. But some renegade, and then the Taoist priest would guide them to their homes while ringing a bell to warn people that he had John Shi with him coming. So yeah, and then some of these John Shi would start eating human flesh and sucking the life force out of people. Right? Choi Huck took a liberty with that. A lot of the films were taking liberty with the original legend, combining Western vampires with the Jiangxi, and this is why they suck blood and not just chi. Chi is the life force that is addressed quite a bit in Taoism. So, so yeah, and then they eventually would become vampires, these very powerful, and then they would be able to jump further and then even eventually fly and run around sucking light, and they could even turn into some great demon and things like that. There was some progression, so there's a lot of interesting things, like they like sunlight kills them like Western vampires, but uh you could fight them with like a staff or something made out of peach tree wood. That way, in particular, were magical Chinese mirrors and acupuncture needles with some kind of seeds on them. All kind, like Western vampires, all kind of special rules in order how to kill them and what their weaknesses are and shit like that. So, but yeah, I think that's pretty much the background on that. So, starting with the synopsis, we start with Master Mao Shan. He's kind of, a big master, and he's a vampire hunter, and he has, his disciples or his, I don't know, his students, wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, and they're out hunting some vampires, and they come across the grave of a vampire that they mention as a general, who apparently turns out to be the king of vampires. So they try to blow up his tomb. Mao Shan is in the ground and kind of like in a divot or cavern or something that the vampire was doing whatever and sleeping or whatever. And they try to blow it up, but I don't know, it blows up while he's in it, and I don't know, not with a lot of explanation. They go to 3 months later, and Wind, Rain, Thunder, and Lightning are looking for Mao Shan, and they come across this. They have a compass that can find vampires, which leads them to the Jiang family's pretty much their castle. They've got a huge household, and it's the day of a wedding. And if you notice in the wedding, a lot of color red. That's like a very symbolic. That's what are used in traditional Chinese ceremonies. What I really like that is, since there was a lot of red in the visuals, that had a juxtaposition with blood-sucking vampires, But yeah, so they try to get into the castle, and they end up getting hired by this guy. They're credited as the butler, but in the subtitles that I was watching, someone very specifically calls him Mr. Cow, Kow. So I don't know. So Mr. Cow.
Yeah, I thought he was a butler as well. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, I thought he was a butler as well.
Yeah. So they tell him, oh yeah, we're Wind, Rain, Thunder, and Lightning, and he's like, oh, those are stupid names. You're Hai Kong Fat and Chow, So he renames them, and now in the credits, if you look at like IMDb or Wikipedia, they're not credited. They're credited as Hai Kong Fat Chow, even though Wind, Rain, Thunder, and Lightning is used more often. But anyway, so okay, the wedding ceremony goes that the bride and the groom are in a chamber with these veiled walls, and basically the family's there, and they're supposed to consummate the marriage. Now, this isn't really addressed directly, but see, this is one of those cultural things where if you know that, then you know what that's about. Like, why are they just sitting there in this room? So yeah, but
and you see the dialogue too, where he says, he's like, look, this is, you'll be safe. I've been married 6 times. I've done this 6 times before. And, he's like, you're in safe hands or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Young Master Jiang. Yeah. Somebody mentions that, oh yeah, they haven't had very good luck. 6 brides have died shortly after the wedding.
Yeah.
So yeah, and her name was Sasa. So Sasa was pretty nervous, but they wake up the next day and she finds young Master Jiang dead from a snake bite. And I guess from there, things just escalate, and the 4, masterless, vampire hunters, encounter more crazy things. Like, what was it? Asa's? It was they called the dragon. Was it her father or her brother that married? That arranged the marriage to young Master Jiang. I can't remember exactly.
It was her brother, wasn't it? Because her brother was the one that was that her brother was the other master, right?
Mm-hmm. And he was after
didn't believe in the vampires.
Right. Yeah. He said to the Taoist priest, "I don't even believe in this crap."
Yeah.
So yeah, did you watch it on Tubi?
No, I watched it on Amazon.
Okay, cool. So did I. So because I wondered if Tubi had a different. I don't know. Sometimes subtitles can be different depending on what you get.
But, yeah, especially on that pirate website that where I think I forgot what movie we were watching. It had subtitles in it. I think it was Nazis on the Moon, and it was like the subtitles are they're like very different depending on which platform you watched it on.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Hong Kong films is before the UK relinquished control of Hong Kong to mainland China, there was a law that any films had to be subtitled in Mandarin, because in Hong Kong they spoke the dialect. These are different dialects of Chinese. In Hong Kong they spoke Cantonese, and all the films were in Cantonese. But I think that a great deal more people speak Mandarin, but they also wanted to be able to show these films in mainland China. So all these films, if you get a copy of a video, pretty direct, like sometimes, like Chinese uh, supermarkets and grocery stores will have videos, and you can get your hands on these, and they're subtitled in Mandarin and English too. But they have a lot of what it has become to be known as hex errors, and a lot of the times the translators were people clearly their English was not their first language. so so yeah, and then I think the streaming, I think has a better translation, but probably not exactly exact.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think from there, that's about the synopsis. You can see where this is going. There's some romance. There's a lot more action. There's even some comedy, even though there's not as comic as the prior films. But I don't know, just a lot of fun.
Yeah, look, man, I did not know anything about this movie going into it except kung fu and vampires. You mentioned those two things, I'm fucking watching it. I don't care how old the movie is. I don't care how new the movie is. I don't care what anybody else's opinion is on it. Look, I love action movies. I love action and horror. So you
Mhm.
put the two together, man, dude. I'm fucking watching it. And let me tell you something. I turned this movie on, and I want to say maybe like 10 minutes to the movie, and I was like, look, I'm gonna like this movie already, just because you got these four brothers. Are these guys really brothers? Were they really brothers, or were they just a part of like the dynasty? And
Yeah,
they
yeah. I just think they were like brothers as the like brother warriors under
like a
Master
certain clan of the
Mao Shan.
dynasty.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, because Mao Shan, is pretty much, because he had more than just the four at the beginning, the graveyard scene,
Yeah,
with to go after. I mean, I think one of the guys got his blood sucked out of. I don't know. What did you think of that effect? The vampires don't bite.
dude, that was awesome. I like you're talking about the effect where he puts his hand up to his face and he's like taking all the basically like the blood
Yeah.
and the soul out of him. Yes, dude, that was so awesome. That was so awesome. Look, this movie is not like any other movie. Like now, the action to me was just astonishing. The action to me was so cool because although it was very like fast moving, because when I first saw it, like when I first like I watched like a little mini like trailer, I guess, of it before I actually like click play on it, and I was like, man, like the way they're like flying and stuff like that, and the way they're like gliding over like trees, like just jumping and over trees and shit. My first thought was obviously a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, because
Oh yeah,
that to me as a kid was
yeah.
just such an amazing fucking movie to watch. Like I don't even remember what the fucking story was about with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. All I remember is that the choreography, the fight scenes, all that cool stuff is just like literally gliding and swords and fighting and kicking, like all this different shit. So now I'm 10 minutes into this movie and we're seeing vampires. We're seeing, because remember at first they're zombies, right? And then they go into vampires. So and then the whole wax shit, like where they're like sitting there and there's the wax and then start seeing the wax melt and shit like that. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is so fucking cool. And it's smart. And especially for 2002, I felt like they were way ahead of their time in terms of that kind of stuff. You know? Um, I look the beginning of it where they went to they were going to the wedding and then the snake bite and all that shit happened, and then we finally got to get into the actual storyline of now these guys are hunting these vampires. They have to save this girl. Look, and to go back to the comedic thing too, there's some subtle jokes in this movie too. I mean, stuff that I actually laughed out loud at. I mean, it wasn't like laugh out loud every 5 minutes or anything, but there was like a couple jokes where I was like, "Wow, this is pretty funny," because you go back to where I mean, anything in terms of the woman, like the what is it, Sasa, right? Or
Yeah,
Sasa,
the
right?
bride. Yeah.
So the part where she's bathing, right? And he's sitting there watching. One of them is sitting there watching her, And then you see the other brothers show up, and he's like looking, and he's like, "What the hell?" And you see the other guy, he's sitting on top of the roof, and he has the little glass little binoculars, and he's looking at her taking a bed. I was like, "Oh my god, this is hilarious!" Like I don't know why, but it was because if it was like something that happened nowadays, you're like, whatever, But the fact that this is a 2002 movie, and you got 2002 Hong Kong movie, you got these guys sitting there. Sitting on the roof and he's doing this. I'm like, this is some really clever humor, especially for back in the day. And then you go on later into the movie where she gets bit by the vampire, and she's laying there in bed, and she finally wakes up, and her voice is all messed up, and she's talking like all crackly like this. And then I believe, which one is it, Thunder or Wind? I believe it was
Thunder was the one that had the
Thunder.
big crush on her. Yeah,
yeah. So Thunder's sitting on a bed with her, and he's talking to the master, the other guy behind him. And then she finally wakes up. She starts talking, and like her voice is almost. She's like, "Why do I sound like this?" He's like, "I don't know." Like he changed his entire voice. Like, "I don't know why you sound like that. I don't hear anything." And, like it's just subtle jokes like that where I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually pretty fucking funny." Look, from the action to the darker scenes, because I believe this entire movie, like it had this dark aesthetic to it. From the choreography with the swords. What again, Mark? What did you think about the fight scenes, by the way? Because I'm sitting there watching these fight scenes, and I'm like, this is so cool. My only complaint about the fight scenes is that I just wish they would slow it down a little bit so we can actually like see what's going on. But besides that, like, you could still see what was going on. Not it wasn't like super fast. It wasn't like like a cartoon or anything, but it was fairly fast. The way that you're hearing the swords, clashing together and all the fight scenes. I like the way the masters were fighting too. We get to the end where they fight over about the gold. And look, well, what did you think about the fight scenes?
Yeah, that frantic pace is definitely something I experienced too. I hadn't seen this movie in quite a while, and the reason why I brought it up as a review was because I just wanted to watch it again because I hadn't seen it in so long, and it came under my radar when I was researching other movies. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a while." So I watched it twice. I ended up watching it twice. I watched it last night and then earlier today. And it definitely warrants multiple viewings because, it's like the first viewing, I had that experience, the frantic pace, not being able to see exactly everything, however, at the same time, there were a lot of really fast moves, but the choreography of the fights was just beautiful. And the second viewing of it, it's kind of like, oh, now I know the language of this choreography better, and I was able to see more in the action than I did my first viewing. So, but yeah, as I mentioned before, the photography in this film, and many films like it in Hong Kong, is quite masterful. I mean, yeah, Hollywood was definitely a starting point for a lot of these directors and screenwriters, but they really put the Chinese into it. I mean, there's people I encounter, not lately. Maybe it's people are used to it more now, but they call it wire fu, like the huge leaps and like in the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where they're like literally just skimming the top of trees. Now some people are critical of that, and
shout out to Terrible Fable too. Says Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was so cool.
Oh yeah, love that film, love it. Yes. And so with that kind of choreography, it's like people, oh yeah, wire fu, I don't like it, it's not realistic. I'm like, well, if you want realistic, there's ultimate fighting, boxing, MMA, stuff like that. I mean, this is art. This is a movie, and this goes back to Chinese theater, and I mean, when they're going back to the Qing dynasty, it's like, these are like legendary people. Like they didn't necessarily have like any overt powers, but the legends, the way legends go, like we have Paul Bunyan in America. Oh, Paul Bunyan was 30 feet tall. and he may have been based on a real guy that might have been like, I don't know, 6 feet something,
Yeah.
So it's like that exaggeration goes into it. And, these legendary stories, because, hey, we have superheroes here in the U.S. These people aren't realistic. I mean, it's like, just, like, just, calm down and, just enjoy the art of it, the beauty of it, because the choreography is just amazing. I'm always amazed at how they do it, how they can, get those, like how they can come so close, like what, old Master John when he was fighting Wind, Rain, Thunder, and Lightning, and
Yeah.
and Dragon Tang. Yeah, like one scene he just puts his sword right to the guy's neck, as he was just flailing about. I'm like, wow, the
Yeah.
way they catch those little moments like that were just amazing. Because yeah, with the speed that we mentioned and how precise everything lands with that. I mean, I'm sure they had a lot of takes and things like that, but trampolines and wires and stuff. Yeah, it's all it's just beautifully done. I mean, something has to be said for the artistry of that. I mean, and the editing.
Yeah. And Ed, also before we get to our ups and downs of this movie, shout out to Jaren. Jaren says, "Sup, bros?" Dropping a comment at
Yeah.
work. He'll catch the replay. Shout out Jaren. Jaren's always supporting the channel. Thank you. Uh, but I want to get to the part. I mean, I want to get to the part where, we that now we've talked about the movie, but I want to get to the part about what what was probably some of our favorite parts of this movie. And I tried thinking about this when I was going over this review with myself, and I really couldn't think of one single favorite part because there are some parts of this movie where I was just like, this is really cool. Like, I'm really interested in what's going to happen next, especially with that. Well, again, I'm really bad with names in this movie, except for, obviously the four brothers and Sasa. But the master, like her brother, right? The other master, the one that didn't believe in
Dragon Tang.
vampires. That part where we get introduced to him at the beginning of the movie, where he's sitting there, and old dude comes to him. He says, "Hey, look, I got fucked up. There's vampires. They're real. They're out there." And he's like, "What a fucking joke! What a fucking joke!" And then the other guy, he says, "Look, man, you owe me some money so I can pay my guys." He's like, "I got money, but my guys aren't getting paid." And then old dude's like, he pretty much says, "And like, I'm okay." and then they fight it, dude. That fight scene at that point, oh my god, that was so cool. And then you go on, so that was one part, and then you go on to the later on into the movie, same guy, and it's the other guy that's sitting there trying to get all that gold, not knowing that there's a snake in there inside of that little treasure, little pit, right? That pit of gold. And then you got the other master. He's sitting there, or he's standing over there on the other side. He's like, "Look," he said, "you don't want none of this, man. You don't want none of this." And you know what he did? Instead of going after the guy with the gold that was going for the gold, he went after the other guy. And I don't know what those lights are called, or the things that hold the lights inside of them. You know what I'm talking about? That white thing
You mean
before he ran over there?
the paper lamp with the
Paper lamp.
Chinese
Okay.
character on it.
Yeah, he threw that at him, and like, well, this part was weird too. This is the only part I didn't. Oh, not the only part, but this one of the parts I didn't understand was like he took his sword and he obviously chopped it down, but then it automatically just went all the way on the other side of the room over to old dude to distract him, and then he goes over there, and I'm like, weird flex, but you know what? I will suspend my disbelief because I've been doing it. I've gotten this far, suspending my disbelief in this movie, so I'll just continue to do that. That those two parts are probably my two favorite parts of that movie, just because of not just the action, although the action played a huge part in that, but it's character created. You know what I mean? It's, you actually are seeing someone develop. You're seeing someone make decisions, and I love when watching film. I enjoy, and this is why I love doing this, is because we get to see in almost every single movie that anybody watches, you get to see the development. You get to see, okay, this person has a decision to make right here and there. There's no more, you know, all right, maybe later on in it, and maybe later on in the movie he has to make it. No, it's now. It's this person has to make a decision now. And I love that part. Even though he wasn't like the main character or anything, I really enjoyed his character development throughout this movie. I really did. Mark, what were some of the ups in this movie, if not like your favorite part of the movie? If you
Well,
have one favorite part of the movie.
yeah, one of the scenes that sticks out in my mind in particular was near the beginning, and I'm talking about what I experienced the first time I watched this film, and kind of what made me love it, because it happened at the beginning of the film, and that hooked me. I was in. I mean, they had me at hello, but I knew I was in for a ride. It was when they first encountered the Zombie King, and one of the dudes, the unnamed vampire hunters, they get wrapped up in something between
Yeah.
him, and they get face to face, and then all of his blood starts shooting out of his eyes, nose, and mouth into the vampire's eyes, nose, and mouth, and I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, I've lost my mind, and I was like, oh my God, I am in for a ride. Like, I knew like anything's going to happen in this movie,
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was weird, like, oh, okay, vampires, and then it's just some like, crusty, rotted face dude with just like holes for eyes and shit. Yeah, it was just wild, and so, but yeah, that right there, that really stuck out of my mind when they first did that. I just love it because, and that's the thing, it got me out of my seat. And I'm not gonna say I don't like these, but it wasn't a jump scare. I mean, but it was something that was just like, what? Yeah, just
like, I can't believe that just happened.
Yeah, was not expecting that at all. So yeah, I was expecting them to get bit or something like that, too. So that's that's really stood out. I don't know. And another scene that I want to mention, just has to do with the photography, because I really like what they were doing with light beams in this movie. A lot of scenes were really foggy or smoky, so we got to see the beams of light. And the one in particular that struck me was when Sasa wakes up in the morning and sees young Master Zhang's hand in that door, and she gets up to go over to see it, and she's coming toward a window, and there's like a diagonal of sunlight, coming down, and it's kind of like, and she just sort of, fades into that and then opens the door. And, it's just like things like that, it's like an action movie, kind of absurd, it's like an absurd action horror film. And yet there's just so much attention paid to things like that. And I just found myself looking for that, like with the red and the wedding, and how so many reds were used in a lot of scenes, and how that was symbolic of blood. I mean, I suspect that was kind of intentional, just learning about how directors do things, or what film studies people say, it's certain things like that, certain kind of details like that are just ways that they want to, sort of give information about the scene without having it come out of characters' mouths.
Yeah. And and I want to caveat on top of that too, because that scene where it was Thunder, Sasa, and I believe her father, like the butler, right, or the man who later became the master or whatever.
Old man.
Yeah. It gave me Predator vibes of, you pour water on yourself and you can no longer be seen by the vampire. And I was like, it's when I saw that scene, I was like, this reminds me a lot of Predator. Where it's like you cover yourself in mud and they can't see, you cover yourself in whatever, they can't see you. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was smart. That was smart, because I didn't see that. I was not paying attention to that too much. And then I saw that and I was like, huh, that's pretty smart.
Are you talking
And then he was
about?
up there in the tree, and he looks
Oh yeah.
down, and then you see the vampire look up, and he just jumps, like he just fucking like leaps up and gets up there to old dude in the tree. And then the smart thing was, before he did that, he wrapped his wrist with I guess rope, right? And he jumps down, and the vampire comes up, and then it fucking breaks. And I was like, it's as soon as that breaks, you're like, oh shit, what is going to happen next? Like how does he get out of this situation? But then Thunder, by that time, Thunder's got Sasa. He's running towards, he's trying to get her out of Dodge. And then he sees this little puddle, and he's like, at first I thought he was just gonna throw her in there. I was like, come on, you don't throw her in there, you know what I mean? Like have some fucking decent, But he's like, look, there's some water. You need to stay your ass in water because
Right, yeah.
it will not see. And dude, I'm telling you, man, I look, this movie was smart on so many levels. And again, Tsu Hark, he created he wrote this movie, right? Like I gotta tell you, man.
Yeah, he wrote the screenplay. Yeah.
Tell you, man, this smart. This dude is smart. Because throughout the movie, I look at a lot of things when I watch it. Like, again, the story of this movie didn't really have me into it. I was more into just the visual stuff. I was more into like, okay, we got action, we got vampires, we got a beautiful woman that needs to be saved. Of course, I'm fucking staying in tune with this. Of course, I'm paying attention. But the fact that this dude puts all this witty and clever and just smart stuff into it, it's just so subtle. It's not too like in your face where it's like, hey, look at how smart I am, a plot twist. It was just very subtle. You know what I mean? It was subtle details of what he did, of like pouring the water on the Thunder. And look, he came face to face with the vampire, like this close to the vampire, or I should say this close. Camera's over here. This close to the vampire. And then all automatically just fucking disappears. And you see him just dripping in water. I was like, oh, man, telling you, man, this movie is so underrated. And speaking of that, I'm glad this person commented this. Shout out to Tristan Cobra. Tristan Cobra says, would you guys consider consider third? Oh, okay. I think I see what he said. Okay, would you guys consider this as a cult classic? Ooh, Mark, I will let you answer that because you know more about this movie than I do, especially about its audience more than I do. Would you consider this movie as a cult classic?
Well, in the strictest sense, no, but only because I had a very difficult time doing some background research on this film. The Wikipedia entry is really short, so there's just a lot of information. Not a lot of information. There's a lack of it. Things like this, but I would call it cult classic in a broader sense, in that it's here in the States or in the Western world, to be into Hong Kong films, directly, because Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, that became the most known Hong Kong film, here in the United States, probably in the West, things like that. It really mainstreamed, because it got the Oscar nomination. I can't remember if it won. It was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film, and it might have won some other awards. But yeah, it was getting attention that way. So I would call, the era of vampires, Tsu Hark's Vampire. Yeah, I would say in a broader sense that it is a cult classic, in that it is a part of the culture, short for cult. That's why they call it cult. It's not like, I don't know, Manson people or Charles Manson people. It's like, so yeah, I would say that in that sense that for for in the United States, like just about all Hong Kong films, especially of the era, where it would be cult films. But yeah, so in this, being a classic, well, I don't know. It all depends on how you define classic. I think it's epic for sure. I think I think that's what they were doing, as I mentioned before. They were taking this genre that had been really popular and known. A lot of it was done on smaller budgets and things like that. I don't know the budget of this film, but Tsu Hark is, definitely a veteran. I mean, this guy was either writing, producing, directing, and or for quite a few years. He's well within the Hong Kong film industry, so he knew what he was doing. He knew how to get the money. He was the producer, things like that. Everything was well established. I mean, mind you, this is kind of coming out at the kind of like as the what they call the Hong Kong boom of the 80s and 90s, kind of after the fact. I mean, it's not like good films didn't come out after that, but it wasn't the same thing, especially after 97 when China came in. We got a more authoritarian government, stricter rules on films and things like that. But at the same time, China does know what an economic power that Hong Kong is. So I don't know, but a lot of protests are going on. Not to get too much in the politics, but 97 is just one of those, one of those checkpoints, where we see a shift in the movie industry in Hong Kong.
And so I had to look up to see if Crouch Tiger, Hidden Dragon won. So they won. All right. So at the Academy Awards, the Oscars, they won International Feature Film. They won Best Cinematography. They won Best Production Design. They won Best Original Score. I got to go back and watch that movie. That was a long ass movie. I got to go back and watch that movie just to hear the score. I don't remember the score that much of the movie. They won Best Picture. No. They didn't win Best Picture. I'm sorry. They got nominated for Best Picture. Got nominated for Best Director, Ang Lee. Got nominated for Best Costume Design and nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. They got a lot of fucking nominations. Like, good God. And I got a nomination for Best Film Editing at the Oscars as well. So they got nominated for 9 categories at the Oscars and won 4 of them. Holy shit. Look, man, and I, not to go too off topic because with Vampire Hunters, but I wonder where it all dropped at. Like whatever happened to the Hong Kong. I'm not saying they're not making movies anymore, but like whatever happened to the rise of the Hong Kong feature films. Like in terms of like being worldwide and being adored and appreciated worldwide. Yeah, that's an interesting subject to go into, but as so we just talked about the ups, our favorite parts, the parts that we liked about this movie. Now here comes the hard part, Mark. If you could fix anything about this movie, what would it be?
Well, I think it would go back to what we talked about prior. I can think of 2 things. One is maybe slow down some of the action. I mean, some of the quick scenes were great, but it did come to the point where it was confusing. So, I mean, I know that was probably some artistic choice, but I don't know. It took me a second viewing to be able to appreciate it more. And I'm not a casual viewer. So, I mean, with the casual viewer in mind, I mean, one of the things about having, like requesting this to be reviewed by you who had not seen this film, probably don't know a lot about Hong Kong films. I kind of wanted to see what your take would be on that, as from that perspective. So yeah, that would be, so that is the thing too. It's like, although they're not, it was a Hong Kong film, they do have an international market, but, mind you, this was before a lot. I mean, there was some attention paid to the Western market, because after all, Hong Kong, that was run by the UK. There were a lot of Westerners living there, a lot of people from the UK and other places in the world. So yeah, so they could have that in mind, but yeah. So I guess that second thing would be that that some of it got a little too confusing. So I would like you. I mean, I would say that you're like not as informed about a film like this, but you're not a casual viewer. I mean, you wouldn't have
Mhm.
this podcast if you were. So
Yeah.
yeah, but just with that in mind, if anybody that would be a casual viewer, it's like, yeah, that's the one thing. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna get a little lost in that respect. Now, as to how it could
Okay.
be changed, I'm not sure. I mean, like, okay, there's one scene I should mention that I forgot to earlier was okay, when we're introduced to who's credited as the zombie wrangler, and yeah, and it's just assumed that we know who he is, but I mean, you don't necessarily have to, right? Zombie wrangler is probably good enough to the uninitiated, but he's a Taoist priest, and one of the ways that you could immobilize a hopping vampire is putting a paper talisman on their forehead. So remember when they came into the room and he had all the corpses with the bags over his
Yeah.
head, their heads with the talisman, and then
Mhm.
I think it was Dragon Tang ripped off one of them
Yeah,
and
I
got
ripped them off.
attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why he got attacked because he ripped off that talisman. So yeah, just things like that. But I think that communicated it well. So yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it needed a little bit more exposition that way. I don't know. I don't know, but maybe that one not so much. But yeah, getting back to the action, yeah, that could have been a little bit. They could have like showed us a little bit more of the scenes that were better choreographed. I'm not saying the scenes that were fast weren't greatly choreographed. But yeah, that aspect of getting lost in it, you and I both experienced it. So
Yeah.
that must be say something. Coming from our different perspectives.
Yeah. And like the fight because I like the fight scenes. You know what I mean? Like I really like the choreography of the fight scenes, but yeah, like you and I both, explained, like it's if they just slowed it down just a little bit and gave us like a little more of that sizzle on the steak, um, it would have capitalized on it, and that's one of my downs of this movie, but it's not like a big one. To me, it's probably more. I wouldn't say it's nitpicking because it's very noticeable, but it's not noticeable to the point where it's like, oh, I can't watch it, or oh, it takes me out of it, because it doesn't. But it is noticeable. 2002 or not, like, I mean, come on. But to caveat on top of the haven't used the caveat a lot lately, but to caveat on top of not slowing down the fight scenes, I love the darkness of this movie. I love dark movies, and I don't mean like it has to be dark, but I like the dark tone of movies. I don't, but I do feel like it is overdone nowadays, just like superhero stuff in general has been done overdone nowadays, and a lot of stuff has been overdone nowadays. However, um, the darkness of this movie, I felt like was not necessary to an extent. So, it's I don't mind having a dark movie. I don't mind having that, like, this is gritty kind of zombie vampire fighting Hong Kong. You got this dying dynasty that's these four guys, these four brothers that they're pretty much humanity's last hope in terms of you know saving, not the humanity's last, but the Sasa's last hope in terms of saving her and giving her husband, having her live this great life after this, being able to live after this. And I felt like this movie could have used just a little lighter, not tone, but a lighter in terms of physical aspect, just a lighter picture to it. And I'm not saying throughout the entire movie, but you're talking about some scenes where I could barely see what was going on because of how dark it was. And I felt like maybe if you just made it just a little bit lighter, just like in terms of lighting, we could probably see it. I kind of felt like, I don't know if you ever watched Game of Thrones, but that last season of Game of Thrones where it was the fight between the humans and the ice people, it was like you could barely see anything. That's one of the largest complaints that Game of Thrones, that us Game of Thrones fans had, was that you cannot see what the fuck is going on in these fight scenes. So to me, that was probably my biggest gripe of this whole movie. That was like the biggest down of this whole movie. Let me go ahead and get these chats out of the way. Tristan Cobra says, Hong Kong films are the shit. Yes, they are. And let me tell you something, man. Easy thing for me is Kung Fu. You put Kung Fu. Look, man, I'm a big Jet Li fan. I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. I'm a big Jackie. Like, you put any kind of fighting in it. I'm a huge Jason Statham fan. Jean-Claude Van Damme, or Jean-Claude Van Damme, however you say it. Steven Seagal. I grew up on Steven Seagal, Chuck Norris. All of them, man. Like I fucking love action movies. Look, Kung Fu, all of the martial arts stuff. Look, I'm a sucker for. Tristan Cobra goes on to say, better than American films nowadays. It depends on which American films you're talking about, though. You got to be specific in that. You can't just say all Hong Kong movies are better than all American movies. You can't. I mean, it's subjective. I get it. It is subjective, but at the same time, you got to be a little bit specific. Shout out to Terry the neighbor. Terry the neighbor. He's got the ice cold face. Terry. And he's got the zombie face as well. So, all right, okay. Terry, let us know if you watched the movie, Terry. Man. Let us know if you've seen Vampire Hunter.
I do have a question for Tristan. Tristan, have you seen John Woo's The Killer or Hard Boiled? So, have you heard of those films, Cord?
I have not heard of the Boiled. I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah.
Hard Boiled. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one.
Pretty much the best that came out of the what are called the heroic bloodshed movies coming out of Hong Kong in the 90s. That's where a lot of influence in American films came from. Started with a film called The Better Tomorrow, but John Woo's The Killer is pretty much thought of as the best, and it's probably my favorite too. But I also really liked Hard Boiled as well, and that's one that is liked a lot. So yeah, with Hong Kong films, it's like, yeah, those Hollywood was taking a lot of cues from Hong Kong. They're very, very important in cinema worldwide. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And one of these days, I think, because I'm thinking of all these different projects I want to do for Happen and just on YouTube in general. I think one of these days I am going to dive into, like, I wouldn't necessarily call it the downfall, but like, what happened to the rise of the Hong Kong action movies? The future films that would be worldwide, like the Crouching Tigers, like The One and Black Mass that came out, almost 2 decades ago at this point, or actually over 2 decades at this point. Stuff like that. Because I really did enjoy those kind of movies growing up. I really did. You're talking about, Jet Li was on top of the world. Now we don't know what this guy's doing now. But shout out to Terry the neighbor. Terry Words. He says, yes, I did see the vampire movie. I would say yes. I did see the vampire. That's funny. Well, shout out to Terry. Shout out to Christian, to Tristan, for commenting, about the movie. So shout out to you guys. Look, man, I really like this movie, but now we're getting to the point where now it's crunch time, Mark. It's crunch time. We got to give this movie a grade. We have to give this movie a grade. And Mark, you knew this was coming. So I hope you were thinking about this before we came on here, because I had to think long and hard. How, not only what grade I would give it, but how am I going to be able to grade this movie? How am I going to grade Tsui Hark's Vampire Hunters: Era of the Vampire? Mark, I will let you go first in terms of your grade.
All right.
I want to know, what grade would you give this movie and why?
Okay, well, I am going to go high because I cannot deny uh, the enjoyment and excitement that I got out of this film. Uh, I mean, doing the research I did, I find out that it's not, not really a critic's darling, but I really enjoyed it. However, I do keep in mind my criticism about some of the fight scenes being too fast, and you do make a pretty good point about the lighting. The darkness. Not, there was a big complaint of mine about Godzilla King of the Monsters. Was damn, I want to see these monsters better. I mean, I get why there's a lot of smoke and shit, but they could have found a better way to get around that. So, so yeah, I give it an A minus.
A minus. Okay. Okay. All right. I got you. I got you. Hey, an A is an A, man. Like, hey, at least they got an A minus. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mark's grade is an A minus. Mark gives Choi Huck's Vampire Hunters an A minus. Now, what's Corn's grade? What do I give this movie? And I'll tell you this: the action, phenomenal. The story, from what I could keep up with in terms of the story, it was good. It wasn't great. It wasn't rocket science or anything. It wasn't any plot twist or anything like that. It was good. There are a couple plot holes, and I wouldn't say a couple, but there was one plot hole in terms of like her getting bit by the vampire and all that, and then still, there is a cure. I mean, no, what did he say? Did he say it was like curable or something like that? Pretty much what they were saying though was that it can be fixed. Being bitten by a vampire, you're not automatically guaranteed to be a vampire. Which I don't know. Maybe they did explain it at the beginning of the movie, but I didn't catch it because I thought that I automatically assumed you get bit by a vampire, you become that vampire no matter what. But then obviously when Sasa was bit by the vampire, it was whatever. So I love the movie. Again, the action, awesome. Story, good, mediocre. The dialogue was amazing because you got look, man. I grew up with older brothers, so I know what it's like to be around. To have that dynamic and that relationship between the testosterone and everybody's like, I got it. It's gonna be, what I mean? Like it's so cool to see that dynamic between four, but whether they're real brothers or not, they're in that dynasty, that clan of brothers. So I absolutely love that dynamic because it was very comedic too, and you find that in real life as well. I find that even growing up, looking back, when I was growing up and my relationship between me and my brothers and my cousins and stuff, just being around like older guys in my family, it was fun and it was funny. Like it was nothing but humor all the time, and I really enjoyed that, and I really resonate with that. So, look, overall, this movie was fun to sit down and watch. Again, visually, if it just would have made the movie just a little bit lighter, it would have been. I would have been able to see exactly what was going on. I didn't have to like rewind and stuff like that. I wouldn't have to rewind and stuff like that. So for me, this movie is going to get a B plus. I give this movie a B plus. And the only thing that's keeping me from giving it, the only two things that's keeping it from giving me an A is I needed just a stronger plot a little bit. And not saying a complex plot or anything like that, but I just needed something more like, and again, I'm not saying this movie was like a simple movie, but maybe this was like a movie where it's like, hey, look, we're just gonna give you guys this synopsis. This is what's going on in Hong Kong right now in terms of the Jiang dynasty. Is that how you say it? Jiang dynasty, and
the Qing dynasty.
Yeah, Qing dynasty, and you got these brothers, and they got to save this girl, and now they're running into all these problems, including vampires. They're looking for this snake. They end up finding vampires. Then you got this master who doesn't believe in vampires, and then you see that he actually sees and fights these vampires. This whole movie was fun to sit down and watch. So I give this movie a B plus. This movie gets a B plus out of me because I absolutely adored sitting down and watching this. I really did. Shout out to Tristan Covert. He says, I give this movie a 7 out of 10.
Which would be
Hey.
a C.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Hey,
sounds
man.
like Tristan has a lot of Hong Kong films to compare it to. So yeah, and that's kind of an aspect of my grading. I mean, yeah, I was grade high, but I chose this movie because I enjoyed it, and but I still have yet to see the other Jiangxi films that I've come across in my research because they're really hard to find. I'm gonna have to really dig deep for these. They're just
Yeah,
not
these were
streaming on Netflix.
I need to go back and like dive into some of these Hong Kong movies, man, because um look, man, this movie was a fun ride. Like, this is a movie that I honestly would have loved to have seen in theaters.
Mm.
It really is. It's a movie that, like, I honestly should have watched it on because my roommate, he has a big screen TV out in the living room. I should have watched it on that because this movie was a lot of fun to just sit down and just relax and just watch it. Just watch the action. Watch the vampires coming out of nowhere, jumping and gliding through the air. Look, that's one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. And I know we've seen it in other movies and stuff like that in the past, but man, this movie hit the nail right on the head when it did it because they didn't do it too much. It wasn't overdone, which kind of what I felt like with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. But this movie was just fun. It was just fun, man. It was so much fun to do, to just sit down and watch a good kung fu / vampire movie, and I love the fuck out of it. But much like myself, much like Mark, and much like Tristan, Terry the neighbor, Terrible Frable, and Jaren, what did you all think of this movie? Let us know in the comments what you guys thought of Choi Huck's Vampire Hunters in the era of the vampire. I shouldn't say and the era of the vampire, but era of the vampire.
Yeah, AKA also known as
it's not Snow White. It's not Snow White and the Huntsman.
Yeah.
But yes. So we gave you guys our grade. Thank you guys again for joining us here today, reviewing this movie. We're going to have another review. I've got a couple movies in my back pocket that I'm thinking of us reviewing here in the next week or so. So you guys stay tuned for that. Also, got a couple episodes I want to release this week as well. One of them is going to be on the Hat Film panel. So stay tuned for Mark and I. And Smith will be coming back sometime soon. He's really busy with work right now, so I don't think he comes back like what next month or end of the month or something like that. But we'll keep you guys posted. So we can get the full trio back together. That's gonna be fun because again, I don't know if I announced it already, guys, but once Smith comes back, we're bringing the big dogs out. We're bringing the big guns out because we're gonna be reviewing. If not doing a watch along of Thor Ragnarok. The one movie, I wouldn't say the one movie, but probably the biggest movie that I have, probably the one movie that I had the biggest gripe with Mark and Smith about is Thor Ragnarok. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be a lot of fucking fun, and I can't wait. So stay tuned for that as well, because that's going to be a lot of fun. But for now, Mark, where can people find you?
The best place to find me is the WalterPaisleyCafe.com. I write a blog about movies, television, music, and much more. I have the plans. Right now, I've only written about Toledo television. I've written about television, movies, and music. But hopefully I'm going to get around to comic books and toys. So, but you can also look at me on Facebook. I'm there under Mark Plaid. I'm there under the Walter Paisley Cafe. and Spidau, and that's my art business. I do art, a lot of cartoon art, other things like that. You just got to kind of look around. But right now, haven't established Spidau as much online, having a little, setting up things, just doing some work on that. But yeah, you can find me at those names also on Instagram and Twitter. Please check it out. Tell me what you think about movies. Ask me what movies you want to see me talk about or write about, rather.
Absolutely, man. And again, if you guys haven't checked out his Tom and Jerry review, check that out. I know you've done more reviews since then, but that's the one that I read. And I honestly, man, it kind of made me want to watch it, even though I didn't want to watch it before reading the review. So if you guys, look, man, if there's one person that convinced me to watch a movie like Tom and Jerry, it is Mark. So go over to Spadal, go over to Walter Paisley Cafe and support this man. Read his blogs, because let me tell you something. This guy has a talent. All right, he's got more than one talent. He's like I say every single time we get on here. He's an illustrator. He's an editor. He's a writer. He's a creator. He's the end all and be all of the Walter Paisley Cafe and Spadal. So again, go over there and support this man. I'm dead serious.
Thank you.
But with all of that down and out, I want to say thank you to everyone who commented today. Jaron, Terrible Frable, Tristan Cobra. That's a pretty cool name, by the way. Terry Wirtz, also a really cool name. I really hope that's your real name, because that's a really cool name as well, a.k.a. Terry the Neighbor. And everyone else who came in here and supported the channel, came in here and supported the video, came in here and just chopped it up with us. And anyone else who comes in here in the future just to watch this review, shout out. Thank you guys for the support. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. With that all said, I am me. This is Mark. We are Half-Ass Podcast. And we are OUT.